I always knew that there is an electrical problem in this man cave because anytime I put an extra load on a power outlet, the light would dim badly. And this should have been fixed years ago, but I just kept procrastinating on it. And then one day, the lighting fixture itself started smoking, and that was it. It became a serious fire hazard and had to be tackled ASAP. The first thing you want to do when dealing with electricity is locate the breaker box and turn the
So
breaker
you want to cut? I'm
off.
cutting both of them off. I don't want to turn this back on and the same thing happens. So just to be safe, I'm cutting both breakers off.
The second step, naturally, if you're dealing with the old school lighting fixture that uses the old style fluorescent bulbs, remove the bulbs. And step 3 is to remove this metal shroud, and that will expose all the wires to you and show you how everything is hooked up. I got lucky with this one, and there's only one screw at each end, so it's no big deal to remove this shroud. And the black box inside the unit is called a ballast, and this is what takes the power from your breaker box and distributes it to the bulbs. And just thick gauge white wire is the main power wire going into the light from the breaker box. It'll hold 3 separate wires. That black one right there, that is what holds all your power. This white one right here, riding on the side of the light, is the neutral wire, and this copper one is the ground. Now, if you have a newer house, that copper one is liable to be green. But I believe this man cave was built somewhere in the 1950s, so we are still old school here. And if we go a little bit further down toward the ballast box, we can see this black wire is burnt, the white wire is burnt, and even the ground wire has a little corrosion on it from the other wires burning. That burnt wire has to be cut out, and we'll get to that in a minute. And here we get a good view of how the wires are connected to the ballast, and the black wire is connected to a black wire from the ballast with a wire nut. Just unscrew these counterclockwise. The white wire is connected to another white wire coming out of the ballast box, and the ground wire is connected to the top of the lighting fixture with a screw. Alright, step 4 is to disconnect the ground wire and the black and white connections and pull that whole power wire out as one unit from the light. All the rest of the wires are in the light, so now we can remove that whole unit from the 2x4. And this will be screwed into that rafter 2x4, and we can just drop the whole unit and go ahead and trash it. Yeah, at first I thought the odor was coming from the burnt wires, but it's actually coming from both the ballast and the burnt wires. And step 6 is to go out and purchase a new lighting unit. While these look like the same old fluorescent light bulbs that you're used to, they're actually not. They're LED lights, and they're just tubes that work in one direction. So it's only casting light on the place that you need it. So if you put them on the ceiling, it's casting the light downward to light up the room more evenly and much more bright. So they're not wasting energy lighting in all directions like the fluorescent lights do. They also don't contain mercury like the fluorescent lights do, and mercury can be dangerous and can be harmful to the environment. And I know all this can be annoying when you're just shopping for a regular old fluorescent light fixture and some bulbs, but I promise you it's a blessing in disguise. They hook up the same way if you get the right one, and just read the package, and if it says no bulbs to replace or something along those lines, and that confuses you, it'll all make sense to you in the end. Remove the unit from the box and you're going to take it apart in top and bottom sections, and here we can see a seam running all the way down both sides of the light, and that's where it disconnects. So this step doesn't require any tools. What you have to do is push these round tabs in just a little bit, just till they click, and unlock the two units. And now you're going to squeeze the sides of the unit together while you're pulling up on the tube section of the light. And now you'll see that there's a couple wires connecting both sections. You're going to disconnect this safety ground wire all the way on the left side where I'm working right now. It's just one yellow wire. And then on the other side, there's two connectors that hold those wires together. Those wires send power from the ballast into the tubes. And just in case, I don't think it really matters which wire goes where, which is connected to which, but I'm marking one of the wires just to make sure I put it back together the way I took it apart. And now we're going to go install the wired section of the unit, but I'm going to put it in a different location than where the old one was, and I'll explain why in a minute. I took some time to think about this, and this is the beam where the light was installed. That's the burnt wire. And instead of reinstalling it in the same place, I've decided to use hopefully these three beams right here to bring light straight down on my workbench. So this way I won't have to replace this whole main wire, and I can just cut it, cut the burnt section out, and it should still reach with plenty of room in the light. I don't think it's wise to splice these together. And the only other option, if we're going to reinstall it in the same place, is to replace the whole wire coming out of the fuse box, and or the breaker box. And I think that's the way to go. And besides that, I just need more light on this table. And I got some light. It's not very good light, but it's some light. I think I can work with it. I might have to go get a higher wattage bulb. And I'm going to connect the actual light fixture first before we do anything else. And I'm hoping that it fits between that beam and that beam. Okay, the unit fit, but it didn't leave any margin of error, and it was just too tight. So I'm going to do a little customizing in the next few clips, and just bear with me. If you're just replacing the unit where it was in the same place, you won't have this problem. And all I'm doing here is tacking on a 1x2 to the inside of each one of those rafters to reduce the amount of space I need to hang that lighting unit. And we're just going to use two of these little screws in each of these sides. We're going to do it at the right side and the left side, two each. And this should go right into that brown section of the board. And here I'm just drilling the starter holes to make things easier when I install the unit. And you're going to see me use a zip tie, a long zip tie, to just keep the light balanced. If you just put one screw in this and then just let it hang, it's probably going to wind up bending the metal it's not the greatest metal in the world. It's real thin and real cheap. So you don't want to bend the whole lighting unit. So I use a zip tie to hold it up. And this is just temporary until I get both sides screwed in. Then I'll just cut it right off. And that's it. The unit is in place, and now we need to connect all the wires. Yeah, here's where I goofed up a little bit, and the camera's way too far zoomed in, but I'm cutting the burnt sections out of the three wires, the main wires that needed to be cut out. And that cut 3 feet off this main wire. And that's one of the main reasons why I relocated this light. But I'm really glad that I decided to do this because it added much more light to where I needed it most, which was right on top
So the
of
copper
that.
wire is big, copper one right there. Will be tied to that same screw, and we're not going to tie it in. This is a separate wire. You can see the ballast is ground to here. So we're going to take this one and just discard it and tie the copper wire. Probably put a washer on it into the same screw. Blende. And that is just black on black and white on white. We got to tie those wires together. There's the black one. It connects to that one, and the white one connects to the white one. And this one will be here. Now we could just tie that wire into the copper wire, but I don't like that idea, so that's not what we're going to do.
And one of these tabs on the side of the light has to be broken out and just pulled out so you can run the wires into that hole.
Run the wires through.
And the copper ground wire has to be kind of bent at the end so it wraps around the screw. And if we add a washer to hold both wires into the ground, it should kind of look like this. Alright, I have to strip the main white wire and the main black wire and connect those to the ballast wires. And we're going to be doing this with the same wire nuts that we took off the old unit, although they do supply 3 new wire nuts with this light. And I'll twist these wires together, black on black and white on white, clockwise. Just go clockwise on this, and that way when you screw the wire nut in, it tightens it even more instead of loosening it. Alright, before I go on to step 10, I was advised by Mark Hillyer to do something about this opening where I ran the main wires into the light because there's sharp edges around that hole, and I need to put some kind of piece of tubing around that hole so I don't accidentally splice the wires open and create another fire hazard. So here's a close-up picture on what I'm doing here, and I'm just using a piece of rubber tubing and some electrical tape to keep that disaster from happening. And step 10 is to connect the safety ground, that yellow wire, all the way on the left side, and the tube wires all the way on the right side that go from the bows to the tubes on the bottom half of the unit. And then you're going to snap all this together as one piece. And here's where a zip tie is going to, again, come in very handy. We are going to tie this up with a zip tie just to keep it all balanced. But this bottom half of this unit is like feathered light. So once you screw that yellow wire into it, it's not going to bend anything or break anything to just hang it there. I mean, it is ultra light. But just to make things easier, yep, we're going to go back to the zip tie. I'm going to make the connections on the right side, the tubes, and before you snap this back in place, make sure no wires are getting pinched and everything is connected. On these plastic tubes, there's kind of like a film on it that you should remove. It's just to protect it during shipping. And just get that off of there before you turn anything on. And finally, here's the scary part. You're going to turn the breaker switch back on, and then you're going to flick the switch for the light, and we're going to see if this works. And boom. How you like that?
I cannot believe how much more light is in here. These things absolutely rock. There's so much more light now. If you're old school and planning on staying old school, I understand. I'm not going to knock you for that. Things just seemed a little simpler back then. But there's a couple things you should know. Number one, the new lighting units, if you get the right one, will hardwire the same way that your old one did. So that's not going to be an issue. And number two, the new ones produce a whole lot more light and just better quality light. And number three, they should save on your electric bills. Probably not going to be, mountains of money, but it will make a little bit of a difference. Number four, the old units are going out. The ones that use bulbs, these things. They're getting hard to find. The stores are not even carrying them anymore, so it won't be long before the only place you can find one that takes these things are going to be in thrift stores and secondhand stores and things like that. As for these, they're going to stop producing them to where it's going to be next to impossible to get one that works. So you're heading down the road of a whole lot of hassle. If you insist on staying old school. When I was a little kid, I had a really, really bad traumatic experience with electricity. And since that time, I've avoided it my whole life. I just stay away from it. The safest bet for me was just not to mess with it. I was an over-curious kid, and I learned real quick that was an issue. that you should respect and stay away from. So I did, and I kept that through my life. I can fix almost anything, but I just refused to mess with electricity. That's how traumatic that experience was. Every now and then, though, you're forced to conquer your fears and get through something. So I had a good friend of mine, Mark Hillyer, who knows all about this stuff, to just kind of walk me through it. So I had his help. As for you, you guys have YouTube. You have this video, and I'm not going to steer you wrong. So basically, what I'm saying is, if I can do this, you can do it too. You got this. I would just take my time. If if you haven't done this before, just take your time and just do some research on Google. The biggest issue of all is to turn that breaker off. Make sure there's absolutely no power going to that light, and that's the most important thing. So I had some questions, and I just got on Facebook Messenger and went straight to Mark. I showed him a picture and I was like, "Is this ground going to work? Is this okay?" And he cleared up any confusion there was and assured me. If you have questions while you're doing this, you can just get in the comments and ask me, and I'll do my best to answer them. If I don't know the answer to your question, I will get it and then return to you and answer.